Hello, welcome to the podcast. This is Johnny.
And this is Ryan.
In this podcast, we dissect and analyze a movie, enjoy free-flowing conversation as we go.
Today's movie is Terminator 2, Judgment Day. We initially selected it because it is one of not just the best action movies of all time, but one of the best sequels of all time. And we thought it was an intriguing place to start because of a couple of reasons that we'll get into. If you aren't familiar with Terminator 2, well, first of all, you should watch it because we're basically going to talk about and spoil and tear apart and dissect the entire movie, so you won't really enjoy this if you haven't seen the movie. But the basic structure of the movie, the basic story of the movie, is that machines in the future have destroyed humanity, and there's a small pocket of resistance of humans left, and the machines send a killer machine, a Terminator, back in time to retroactively kill the leader of the human resistance, and the humans send back a protector to make sure that doesn't happen. So the entire movie, other than a brief introductory scene, a couple minutes long, takes place in the present day of 1991 when the film was made. It does not take place in a future sci-fi dystopia, and it is the movie of trying to save a little boy's life who's a little shit throughout the movie, but I guess still savable.
And also not quite a little boy. Not as little as we're led to believe.
Well, the character is 10. He's 10 years old, according to the police screen we see.
The child actor is not.
He is not. He was, I think, 12 or 13 or so when they were filming, and I think he actually goes through puberty during the movie.
I did a quick look on some fun facts about the movie, and yes, they had a few problems with his voice starting to crack.
His voice is actually one of the funniest things in the movie. It's fairly light on comedy in terms of a lot of big-budget Hollywood action movies, especially, this is long before, but in the day of all the Marvel movies, and even stuff that was coming out in the 90s, like Bad Boys. It's fairly light on the comedy in this movie. There's a few one-liners. There's some good visual gags.
Yeah.
But when his voice cracks occasionally, it's one of the funniest things in the movie because you just want to be like, shut up, you little pissant. You don't know anything. You're 10.
The unintentional humor.
Yeah.
But humor is sprinkled in, or peppered in, I should say, which is a big shift from Terminator 1, where, in my opinion, that movie was more of a slasher. It reminded me a lot of...
a horror movie, at least.
It was a horror movie, yeah. Well, when I say slasher, I mean there's a seemingly unstoppable, almost supernatural threat. Bullets can't stop it, and it kills.
It terminates, in fact.
It terminates. Yeah, that's appropriate, I suppose.
Yeah, and that element is here in the sequel. In fact, the antagonist is even scarier and more unstoppable, somehow, than the unstoppable killing machine of the original film.
Yes.
But there is much more of just the vibe of it being an action movie as opposed to a horror movie. Even though I think the original, if you had to classify it in a genre, put it on a shelf at Blockbuster, it would go under action still.
Absolutely.
But it had a lot more horror elements. This one there is some horrifying and or grotesque things in the movie.
But it's not the central theme.
It's not.
The central theme is an action movie that focuses a lot more on character development that you do not see in the first movie. And we were also saying that this is one of the best sequels ever. And for one of the reasons for that is that you could absolutely watch this movie without having seen the first one and not feel lost.
Yeah, they actually... I noticed it watching it this most recent time because I think neither of us had seen this movie for years.
It's been a while.
And then we rewatched it just before recording to kind of refresh our memories. But I noticed some things that I maybe didn't ever think about that way before, having not seen the movie in a while. One of them was that there's voiceover at various times in the movie, only 3 or 4 times, because it's not a consistent device, so it's a little weird when it happens, but it happens in the opening, which is good because it at least sets the tone that that's allowed.
And it's also always Linda Hamilton.
It is.
Who plays one of the protagonists. I'm not quite sure if you could label any one of them the main protagonist. They all are pretty... There are 3 main characters. You have Sarah Connor, who is the mother to John Connor, and then you have, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator.
Yeah,
but they get equal spotlight.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a miniature ensemble. What I was going to say, though, about the opening voiceover is that Sarah Connor, Linda Hamilton, basically summarizes the first movie in about 2 sentences. And you realize how simple of a movie the first one was?
Yeah.
The machines sent a machine back in time to kill her before she gave birth to her son. A man was sent back in time to protect her. He ends up being the father of her son in a nice little time loop.
Yeah, time travel's fun.
And she just says about the Terminator from the first movie, it failed. And that was really the final hour and a half of that 2-hour movie, was just trying to make it fail and eventually succeeding at making it fail.
Yes.
Anyway, spoiler alert, the character that's in the sequel survives the original movie.
Yeah, she made it.
So it's great that they acknowledge right off the bat, this movie came out 7 years after the first one, I think. I think the first was 1984, this was 91. They know that a lot of people either won't have seen the original or will have forgotten about it entirely in the intervening 7 years. This wasn't the age where every successful movie got a sequel and you were supposed to have caught up on the canon. So they summarized the original in about a minute in voiceover at the beginning, and then you might have taken the number 2 out of the title, and the movie still would have made sense.
Yeah, I remember watching this before seeing the first Terminator.
Me as well.
And as a kid, but I mean, even as a kid, I feel like if there were some crucial points from the first movie that didn't get across, that I would have noticed. But yeah, no, this movie, even as a child, with very limited understanding, seems to work well as its own standalone movie.
It does. And another reason we think that it's one of the best sequels of all time is because, as much as it is great at standing on its own, which is a nice thing to have, it really expands upon the first one in a fantastic and kind of original way of expanding on the original, because it's almost like doing the same movie but better.
Yeah.
And just with way more characterization, way better special effects, although for the budget they had, the limited effects in the first one were great.
Yeah.
But it was almost like James Cameron, the writer and director of both films, had his breakout with the Terminator, and then a few years down the road went, I could have done this movie a lot better if people knew that I knew what I was doing and gave me the budget for it. So he kind of just did that. It was the same plot, same movie. It had some fun rearranging of things, that Arnold Schwarzenegger is now playing the protector and not the villain.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of other things that are different in that way. But it really was just a satisfying expansion and improvement upon a good movie in the original. Well,
James Cameron knows his sequels.
Yes.
And
he better, because they're making 5 new Avatar movies.
Oh my god. Well, I just think back on another one of the greater sequels out there, Aliens.
Which was a sequel to someone else's movie.
It was a sequel to Ridley Scott's movie.
And Alien, I would say, is the best slasher of all time.
Yeah. I would say Alien is the best slasher, but Terminator 2 is the best sequel. Because Alien 1 and Terminator 1 were both very similar in that in the type of movie that they were, and they both took a dramatic shift for their sequels, which were both directed by James Cameron.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the commercial success of Aliens had anything to do with him. Oh, probably not. I mean, Terminator is his project, so it wasn't really up to him. He could make that decision himself.
It probably didn't make it happen, but I think it had to have empowered him, at least internally, to think, hey, I can make a huge budget, hugely ambitious action movie sequel.
Do you think that maybe the commercial success of Aliens allowed him a larger budget for Terminator 2?
I'm sure it did. I mean,
Yeah.
Aliens, he was trusted with. They knew it would be successful because the original was so popular.
Yeah.
Terminator 2, I mean, the original was also very popular. I think there was probably a little bit less faith in it going in than there was with Aliens, but he nailed Aliens so fantastically that I think it did. And he made The Abyss in between. It wasn't like he was in a hurry to make Terminator 2.
Yeah, he was already pretty well known.
And The Abyss, there's the scene where there's the metal goopy monster. I haven't seen The Abyss in years.
I've never seen The Abyss.
If you do, and to anyone who listens to this, I gotta tell you, you have to watch the director's cut. The theatrical cut of The Abyss, the studio cut out a huge thing near the end that was, I swear to God, the entire fucking point of the movie. And it got cut for the theatrical edition because there's some Cold War political bullshit that they didn't want to aggravate people with. So if you've never seen The Abyss, or even if you have, hell, watch the director's cut. It is the single biggest difference in quality between a theatrical. Most of the time, the director's or the extended cut is not necessary. We actually watched the director's cut for Terminator 2. The scenes that were added were mostly superfluous. The original cut, I actually think, is a better movie. The director's cut is, well, we can't make the director's cut shorter. We have to add in the extra scenes, but they mostly didn't work.
There's one scene that did work that I liked, and that was the scene at some point they make the decision to reset the CPU of the protective Terminator, Arnold.
He's the T-101, I think. He said,
no, he's a T-800.
T-800.
That's the model of Terminator.
He describes himself as Cyberdyne Systems Model 101 in this movie.
Oh, that's right.
So I guess the T-800 is what he's known as in.
Maybe that is in reference to what version of T-800 he is. You know, because software updates.
Yeah, because I know I've heard him referred to as that, but I just watched the movie, and he says he's Model 101.
He did say that.
It's possible he's an older model than the one from the first one, because he's the ones that the rebels stole. They might have only been able to get their hands on like the oldest model. You know?
The T-800 is the only model that looks like that. I'm gonna geek out a little bit. I've researched, not today, long ago. I researched the different models of Terminators.
It's okay, Johnny. You can be a nerd today.
I'll be a nerd today. I've certainly researched the earlier models of Terminator, and this is the first one.
Terminator lore.
This is the one that Skynet, which is the computer overlords of the
artificial intelligence
that
takes over. And it just nuked everybody.
Well, it nuked Russia because it knew that Russia was going to nuke.
Which I thought that was when they were explaining that in one of the many plot advancement scenes of Terminator 2. It struck me that was clever. It was simple. Yeah. It played on something that everybody was already afraid would happen.
It was fresh in their minds. Like,
the Cold War was
over.
just ending. Yeah, 91 was when this came out again. And everybody was familiar with mutually assured destruction. And so when that turns out to be the method that Skynet uses to destroy humanity, it just takes America's nukes and throws them at Russia, knowing that that'll set off the chain reaction that kills everybody. Yeah. It was elegant. A lot of things in this movie are elegant and efficient, and I mean that in a good way. Not like a cookie-cutter efficiency that you think of stupid popcorn movies, but an efficiency of filmmaking that was admirable, and that is just one small example of it. There's a lot of different kinds of efficiencies. The amount of time they spend in a car in this movie is actually, or on a motorcycle, a lot of this movie is spent in a car, and it feels natural for that to be the time that plot advancement happens. Because what else can you do in a car but talk?
Yeah, it's a very enclosed space where you have, no choice but to talk or to be silent. No one wants to watch a movie where two humans and a cyborg from the future are sitting silently in a car.
Yeah, I think they had about 9 hours of footage of them just on a road trip to and from Mexico, and they had to cut all that for the theatrical run. Yeah.
Oh, they couldn't have a runtime of...
You couldn't have 12-hour runtime, where 9 hours of it is a road trip.
It's a shame.
They wanted to, but again, efficiency. They had to cut all that.
That'd be a great movie to watch while you're on a road trip.
It would.
You get like a portable DVD player and have that road trip scene running for the 9 hours that you're driving.
It wouldn't be too distracting to the driver because nothing's happening.
No, yeah.
We'll have to contact James, see if he can send us the full director's cut of the director's cut.
Yeah, it's a little...
James Cameron, if you're listening, we want the 12-hour road trip version of Terminator 2.
He's not listening.
Whatever.
One thing that I had tried to take note of when I was watching, because, knowing that we were going to be recording this podcast, I was trying to look at the movie from a more technical point of view, and one thing I was trying to pay attention to and focus on was the use of color.
Okay.
Something that I generally don't look for in a movie actively, but something that is used to invoke emotion. And there were 3 colors most used in this movie. Blue was used a lot, and I don't know if that was because they were trying to invoke the emotion of blue, which is...
happiness?
Depression.
Oh, shit.
And technology, which could play into it, though I don't really...
The lasers in the opening sequence, or the laser guns that the people in the future are firing at each other, I think it's blue lasers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does.
So it's possible that was... I mean, I don't know. This is all speculation. And then the other most used color was white, because the character Sarah Connor, after the events of the first movie, what she ends up doing between the first movie and this movie is she has her son with the protector from the future. He dies in the first movie.
He does.
So she, knowing what's in store for humanity, being Judgment Day, the apocalypse, the machine takeover, takes it upon herself to learn the necessary skills and pass those skills on to her son, who is meant to be the leader of the future resistance.
In the words of the snothead son, he's going to be a great military leader.
Yes.
Yes. Which he clearly, now that his mom has been committed to a mental institution, kind of resents her for doing to him.
A little bit. When you grow up believing what your mother says until she's put into a nut house, and then you doubt everything. So the point is that she ends up in a mental institution.
And when John Connor, when the son is recounting his childhood, his life story to the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he talks about how his mom would, quote, shack up with anyone that had weapons knowledge or military training, basically implying that her entire dating history through his entire childhood was just based on who could train him in more military stuff.
I don't think that was the sole purpose, though.
I think it was always her primary motivation. I mean, the character Enrique, who we meet about halfway through the movie, in the Mexican desert, who has Sarah Connor's weapons cache,
Impressive.
Which is a fantastic scene where they just get to show you all the guns they're going to use in the second half of the movie.
You just know shit's going down.
That it's in the underground bunker full of guns when John and the T-800 are making sure all the guns work and loading them up to take them on their new quest. That's when he's telling the story of his childhood, and he really did make it seem like everything she did in her life, including choosing who she dated and where they lived, and everything was with the sole purpose of his military training. And apparently the biggest skill he actually gained from all that was how to hack into an ATM to steal $300 to play video games.
Which, coincidentally, also works on Cyberdyne security tech.
Yes, I loved the payoff that he has been carrying around his backpack all movie, which seems to have one thing in it, and that's his ATM hacking laptop.
Yeah.
And a good hour and a half after he uses it in the beginning, you think it's just kind of a little intro to show that he has more knowledge than a 10-year-old should to, steal money from the ATM to go to the arcade. It comes back out of that backpack way later to override the security system by figuring out the pin that would work, although I thought no pin was supposed to work because the alarm was going off. It was a little confusing, but it was great to see that little jigamadoodle.
It was
come
kind
back
of
out.
it was fun to see it come out, but it was also a little bit of an eye roll.
It was, but
it worked. It was fine. It's not that big of a deal.
It was fun to reference the beginning of the movie, and they did a really good job in this up until the very end, really, of keeping the kid kind of useful. You know, in a lot of movies, the one that comes to mind for me is Jurassic Park, another one of my all-time favorite movies. The kids are there to be saved. Saved from the dinosaurs, saved from being stuck in a tree, saved from being electrocuted. Spoilers. The whole thing's spoilers. You should see every movie before you listen.
Yeah, it's true.
And in that, I mean, the kids they're fun characters, but they're useless.
They're used as a plot device to enhance the other characters.
Right.
And move their progression along.
Yes. Whereas in this, John Connor, he's not just useful, I did air quotes there, he's kind of the emotional center of the movie. He's our moral compass in this. Everyone else is, including his mother, is really a heartless killing machine. And
they're hardened by the knowledge of what's to come.
At the very least, yeah. So those kind of moments where he hacks through the security system, when they're breaking into Cyberdyne, various other parts, he's the one who sees that the cops are there and gives them warning.
Yeah.
Which is one of maybe my favorite comedy moment in the movie.
How many are there?
All of them, I think. It was great. And he delivers it really well.
He does. I was surprised with his performance. I usually hate, hate's a little bit of a strong word. I'm not a huge fan of child actors most of the time.
Yeah. He carried the movie. He was the only human character in it for most of the running time.
Oh, I wanted to get back to another point in why I think that Sarah Connor wasn't only using those men with a skill set that she could find beneficial, is because she did have, there was a little bit of narration where she had mentioned that there were a lot of would-be father figures, but as soon as she started talking about the Skynet, Judgment Day, apocalypse shit, they all left.
Ah, I see.
So I don't know if she was necessarily... She may have initially... I don't know.
Maybe. When she's giving that little voiceover, she's pretty dismissive, even derisive of the would-be father figures. She's talking about... It's the scene where John Connor is teaching Arnold how to high-five and down low too slow, and he's just looking at him like he's crazy, and then John Connor's teaching him that this is a fun human game.
Yeah.
She's looking at that happen and saying, this Terminator would never drink too much and hit him, never abandon him. She's naming the things that apparently the other male father figures in his life have done. They don't seem like she's been dating winners. She's been dating people with knowledge of weapons.
Or that may be her experience with her own.
Do we ever get that kind of?
I mean, it's also kind of a common thing.
It is
domestic abuse,
could just be a larger commentary on society where men and fathers are.
Well, we're all destined to destroy ourselves, according to. Was that Sarah Connor, or was that John Connor? When there was a scene where there are two kids playing with guns.
The kids playing with the guns is probably.
I thought it was a little foreshadowing of when the Judgment Day comes, then those children will be old enough to be soldiers. And they will no longer just be playing with guns, they will be fighting with guns. Or they'll all die.
I could see that. I hope that was the point. When I was watching it, it kind of just seemed... It was one of the less winning moments of the movie for me. It seemed like just kind of a heavy-handed way of saying to us, oh, look, humans are inherently violent and shitty, and they need to be saved from themselves. And it's like the kids playing with guns is supposed to make you think that. It was a little... To me, it was just heavy-handed moralizing. To show that. And they're doing it in slow motion. It's a little dramatic.
That's probably what they were going for, because right after is when they start talking about how humans have an innate need to self-destruct.
Right.
So that ties into what you were just saying. So that's probably what it was. Before they had said that, though, before they had made that clear, my initial thought was they will be actually fighting with those guns.
It could have been intended to be both. I never thought of it that way, the way you're saying. So if it was that makes it a little better.
Let's just pretend like that.
It's a movie
anyway.
It's
open to interpretation. Everything's open to interpretation.
And everything's pretend. Nothing matters. I will say, along those lines, that was a big theme of the movie, was that humans are inherently destructive.
Yes.
That Judgment Day is coming, and it's our own doing. We're going to jump right to the end of the movie for a second. The final line of the film, it's voiceover after everything has gone down. Sarah Connor says, "If a machine, a Terminator, can learn the value of human life, maybe we can too." Or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And that was, again, the voiceover is a little bit hokey throughout.
It's not as bad as Blade Runner.
It sounds like Harrison Ford is just reading a grocery list off his refrigerator.
And he's drunk as hell.
No, you're right. It's not that bad. And no, it's delivered well. Like, Linda Hamilton is actually fantastic in this movie. She never overacts. When she first sees the Terminator come out of the elevator, when she's escaping the mental hospital and she thinks it's going to kill her, it's Arnold, it's the evil one from
It felt like an appropriate response.
Oh, it was entirely appropriate, and she nailed that feeling of just scrambling to get away. The human drive to survive is always there, but just the utter terrified hopelessness in her face was great.
Oh yeah.
So she's well. She does the movie very well, and the voiceover she does well also. But that to me was the biggest, like, oh, this is a big budget Hollywood action movie intended to make as much money as possible, and the voiceovers were for the less astute in the audience to kind of keep up with the morals and themes of the movie. So when it ends with a voiceover saying, "Oh, maybe we can learn the value of human life as well," it's like, yeah, that was the point. That's what we've been doing the whole time.
Well, your average casual moviegoer needs to have their hand held oftentimes.
Yeah. And I think there was only maybe 4 times in the whole movie. There's the opening, I think 2 other times during the movie, and the closing, or the only voiceovers. It's a small part of the movie.
I think there were a few. I think that was something that came from the first movie. If I remember correctly, there were a lot of voiceovers. I think for the most part it was from Kyle Reese, John Connor's father.
Yeah, and I guess that's good too. If Kyle Reese, the protector from the first movie, was doing the voiceover there, then this is kind of Linda Hamilton taking on the mantle.
Sarah Connor did the little voiceover at the end of the first Terminator too, because she was the last survivor.
It's true. It's true.
I don't know if that's true. I want to say that happened, but it's been a long time since I saw the first Terminator. I think I'm due for a refresh, especially after watching this.
If we were professionals, we would have watched the first one in preparation for this podcast, but we did not do that.
This is the Amateur Hour podcast.
Yes, it is. We are decidedly amateur.
I totally got derailed.
Yeah,
I was talking about color.
Oh yeah, you got to blue? We talked about blue.
I felt the need to explain why I was talking about a mental institution, and the reason was I gave you the reason why she was in a mental institution, but the color primarily used there was white, which seemed a bit off with the emotional tie to white in film, which is purity, order,
innocence,
and in that movie, the mental institution was anything but.
Yeah, the white, if the color there means anything, it was like an oppressive sterility.
Yes.
Because all the scenes of her in the mental institution are just, they're oppressive. They are depressing. She is being broken down.
Licked.
That was
a weird little scene there.
Yeah.
I mean, it fits because it just goes to show this is not a healthy place.
It's not a good place to be.
No.
And from the first time that you're introduced to her in this movie, because you see the original and she really grows and becomes strong through the course of the first movie. It ends with her kind of riding off into the sunset, victorious and ready to face the dangers of the future. And then the first time you see her in this movie, she is
at her lowest point.
She's at her lowest point. Yeah, it really drops you right in on her. Things have not gone the way that you would have hoped they would have after the first one. We're going to pop a bottle of scotch here. There it is. She's observed like an animal in a zoo It's the Doctor who is actually...
he was in the first one.
He has
and
a
the
brief
third
role
one.
in the first one.
And the terrible third one.
I gotta be honest, I never saw the third one. We could talk about that later, why I refused to see the third one. But,
yeah.
he's leading around a tour group. He's like doing a guided tour of the mental institution to these, I guess, guest doctors, or maybe they're medical students.
They're probably medical students.
And they peer through the window in her door as she's doing pull-ups, and he's describing her hallucinations of Terminators that are going to destroy humanity. And I love the scene where he's kind of making fun of her to these med students. He says, and there's these Terminators, machines sent back from the future, who look human, of course.
Yeah.
And he just says it like she's a fucking joke. She's not even on the camera yet. She hasn't even appeared in frame yet, and she's just being mocked. It's a great start.
He does that throughout, though. Like, she has her evaluation coming up, and, she has a weird dream of her late lover, Kyle Reese.
That was a scene that was director's cut.
That was a director's
not in
cut
the movie
scene,
originally.
Which I can understand why they cut it from the movie.
Oh, I really did feel that the overall of this being the director's cut that we just watched, that the theatrical version was just, I hesitate to say objectively, but for me it was better than the director's cut, the original, I mean.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
The scene where she hallucinates Kyle Reese and he says to her, John is in danger, you're the only one who can save him. It's like, first of all, how could she know that? She doesn't know there's a Terminator back here yet. She has no knowledge of that.
Yeah.
It's like she has clairvoyant abilities that are being manifested in this hallucination, and he's like, I love you, I'll always love you. It's just this weird...
It's forced. It's forced, and it's...
There's a reason they cut it.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be used as a tool to progress the story, to give her the drive to leave, when I think just needing to get out and protect her son was enough.
It was enough. She knows that Judgment Day, the rise of the entire Skynet and everything, she knows it's coming. She doesn't need more motivation to break out.
No.
And
I mean, she's a survivor, and right now she's in captivity. Like, that is enough for her to want to leave.
And they had already established, the doctor says to her that, you've got repeated escape attempts. Like, we've already established that she wants to get out. Mm-hmm. That whole room.
How's your knee, doctor?
And then he shuts off the intercom to explain to them, yes, she stabbed me in the knee with my pen a couple weeks ago. And he turns the intercom back on, and he goes, oh, it's fine, Sarah, but you can tell that it's like a sore spot for him.
Yeah, but he is a terrible doctor.
He doesn't...
He pokes at her. It's like he has this personal vendetta against her, like when she's going through the evaluation to get released to a minimum security mental institution. What ends up happening is she puts on her sweet face and she says, I just want to see my son. And he sits there and nods to the whole thing. The whole thing's being recorded.
Well, she even says, I know that the Terminators don't exist. I see this now. She really, of course it's an act. She knows they're real. But he, to his credit, he sees right through it.
He does see right through it, but
I think you're just telling me what I want to hear.
I feel like he's trying to humor her and give her a little bit of hope, though. Where he's sitting there and he's nodding, and then he's like, you're very intelligent, and I think you're just trying to get to a minimum security prison so that you can escape. And then...
He does toy with her a bit.
He does toy with her a little bit, and I think that there's something obviously personal going on, considering he got stabbed.
In the knee, too. There's a lot of kneecapping in this movie.
Yeah, there is a lot. She flips out, understandably so, because this was her chance to get to her son, and this guy took it away from her, or, whatever. And he turns to the camera behind the glass and says, Model citizen. Yeah.
Which was great that then it cuts straight to her son with his friend, the kid from Salute Your Shorts, riding the motorcycle with the stolen money on the way. Like, it's the next scene with them after they steal all the money from the ATM. And he mocks her and says model citizen, and then it cuts to her model citizen of a son. I thought that's the kind of humor this movie has. It's quiet about its humor for the most part. There's the one-liners and there's the real gags.
Yeah.
But even those are moderated. But I really liked that moment where you see her freaking out and trying to attack her doctor. Oh, model citizen. And then
It's good editing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
What did you think of John Connor in the arcade? He was playing two different games. One of the games was...
I didn't notice. Tell me that one of them was Time Cop.
No. I don't think Time Cop was a thing then.
Was there no Time
In
Cop?
1991? He was playing Missile Command
Okay.
and Afterburner.
Missile Command being the classic 80s arcade game where you're defending major cities around the world from destructive, massive missile attacks, which
Yes.
is kind of foreshadowing of learning about Judgment Day later in the movie.
And then Afterburner it was piloting a plane, but both games were war related,
Yes.
and which kind of speaks to like, oh, he's going to be the future leader of the Resistance. And the other thing I thought was funny was that he was playing both of them on machines. I mean, their games on machines.
They weren't at the chess club in that scene; they were at the arcade.
Yeah,
it's true.
Which he was mocking video games at another point when he was talking about how he ended up getting sent to a normal school. Where all the kids just wanted to play Nintendo.
Yeah, the normal kids just were into Nintendo. He says it so mockingly.
They had to incorporate video games in this because that was the time when video games were blowing up.
First entering the real, like, a real sort of mainstream presence. Where you could play video games and not immediately, even if you'd had sex in your life, you retroactively became a virgin.
Yes.
If you played video games.
Arcades were new. Fairly new. They were a place to be still.
Yeah.
They were popular. Arcades nowadays are kind of a thing of the past.
Sort of. I mean, they're still there.
They're there, but most people are at home playing their home consoles. Anyway.
Or playing slot machines on your goddamn smartphone. By the way, I don't want anybody to turn it off, if I offend you, but I think if you play slot machines on your smartphone...
Is that a thing?
Oh, my God. Not only that, no, but you're not betting real money.
So what's the point?
The point is that you click a button and flashy, spinny things spin around for a bit, and then it tells you if you won or not, and you get imaginary coins, and then you just click the button again, and it spins again. It's literally... It amazes me that it exists, and they're quite popular. People just like to turn their brains off and watch flashy lights go in front of them.
I mean, I could maybe see that being useful for someone that has a gambling addiction that's trying to stop.
I think, if anything, it fosters a gambling addiction. Because once you lose the high of getting the fake coins, hey, you got to get the real thing.
I don't know if money is real to a gambling addict.
Well, this is a different conversation.
All right, Terminator.
Yeah.
2.
Just turn off the fake slot machine. Your life will be better for it.
Yes.
I loved, speaking of the arcade scene, something that I especially loved on rewatching the movie was that we were maybe led to believe, or at least to think it was possible, that redheaded Salute Your Shorts kid was going to be relevant, a main-ish character. He warns John as the T-1000 is walking around asking kids if they've seen him. He's showing them a photograph he has, trying to just act like a nice cop. Oh, have you seen this boy? John Connor's friend runs up to him and says, hey man, the cops are scoping it out for you. You gotta get out of here. So John runs away, and then the kid tries to delay the cop. He walks up and says, hey, I think I saw that kid you're looking for. And he's about to point and misdirect the cop somewhere else. But at this point, the T-1000 has seen John fleeing. He pushes the friend out of the way violently, doesn't kill him, but...
Should have killed him.
No, that was... I'll get to that in a sec, actually. I have thoughts on that. Pushes him out of the way, and the kid makes kind of a funny little wah! And then we never see or hear from him again. He is never mentioned again. He is not important. The important characters in this movie are Sarah and John Connor, and the two Terminators.
His purpose was only to warn John Connor that a cop was looking for him.
Yeah.
That was his sole purpose.
And I guess to just show... it's hard to show that someone is a troubled youth if they don't have a troubled youth cohort. So the part of the characterization, the character setup of John Connor kind of being a rebellious, troubled kid is that he had his friend to engage in these rebellious activities with, like blowing off his foster parents and riding away on a motorcycle with a boombox. Your
foster parents are kind of assholes, huh?
Kind of assholes. Yeah.
Yeah, why? Because they asked you to clean your room, John Connor?
Yeah.
Come on.
Note to all you kids out there, cleaning your room is cool.
Super cool.
If you don't do it, you may develop mold, which will make you ill.
We're currently recording in my room. Ryan, will you have a look around and tell me how it is?
I'll give it a B+.
I better clean.
My room is probably a D, so that's why we're here. So yeah, the friend is just there for extremely basic character setup purposes, you know, and the warning in the arcade, which could have been accomplished differently without him, honestly. I just thought it was great that they showed us a character who, if it was a lesser movie, would have been there as kind of a comic relief.
Yeah.
He would have been kind of the snarky, sarcastic kid who is not intimately involved in the Terminator lifestyle, so to speak, who would have been kind of an outsider.
I would have hated that in this movie.
Well, yes, this movie
it would have been terrible.
It's better for it, but that's what I'm saying. In a lesser movie, there would have been this comic relief, the funny additional character, and in this movie, they literally toss him aside, and he's out of the movie. As soon as his usefulness has expired, he is gone. Like
most redheaded children.
So anyway, after that scene,
yes,
we get the first fight of the movie, which is approximately 30 minutes in. So there's the action scene, you might call it, that is the opening. It takes place in the future.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
followed by a quick little motorcycle club bar brawl.
The biker club brawl is one of that set the tone for the movie.
Yes.
I know we talked about this movie somewhat before we started recording. You had some thoughts on the biker scene.
I did. I feel like immediately after the biker scene, James Cameron used a very quick and easy tool to let the viewers know that this wasn't going to be like the first movie, which the first movie was very serious. It was a horror movie, essentially.
In tone, at least.
In tone.
And also other ways.
And this is the only time it happens in the movie, and it didn't happen in the first movie at all. They play a song that wasn't composed by Brad Fiedel, who was
right. It was neither composed for the film nor diegetic. It wasn't playing out of a boombox on screen.
Yes, it was put in intentionally, paid for, I'm sure. And it was bad to the bone, and I
bad to the bone.
Should know who does the song, but
George Thorogood and the Destroyers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
They have done other songs, but I think they qualify as a one-hit wonder.
Okay.
I didn't grow up with them. It's a little before my time, but George Thorogood and the Destroyers.
Yeah.
And that riff, that opening riff. Would you like
memorable.
To sing it, or should I?
You.
Good
job.
It's just.
It's iconic.
It's just the blues.
It makes you feel good.
It's iconic.
It is iconic.
Everybody knows what that riff means.
So that riff starts off in the camera pans from his brand new biker boots to his leather pants. It scrolls all the way up to his face, and he puts on the sunglasses that he just took from another biker guy. And I feel as though that was intentional, as James Cameron's way of telling the viewer, this isn't like the first movie. This is going to be a different ride.
It's going to be a little more fun.
It's going to be a little bit more fun.
The first movie's not fun. It's good.
There's like maybe a handful of like awkward, jokey moments that situational.
Maybe there was a little bit of kind of fish out of water culture shock from Kyle Reese's character not knowing how 1984 works.
Exactly.
But
maybe like joking about like the weapons that they use in this time, and
it was a dark movie though. And this one, Bad to the Bone, is a fun song.
It's a fun song to let you know that we're in for a fun movie. And I think at the time, I'm not sure if the trailers depicted Arnold. I'm sure they did as the hero of the story. But
you're probably right.
It's
a shame because figuring it out is fun.
Yeah, there's a scene that makes you feel like it was intended to be a big reveal, which is John Connor from the arcade is running away from the antagonist, the T-1000, who at this point they didn't make clear was the antagonist.
They haven't shown him kill anybody yet at that point.
He seemed like you had no idea that he was liquid metal.
Nope.
That was his power.
Yep.
He seemed almost like he could have been human.
He was very kind and polite when he was asking John's foster parents about him.
Charismatic.
And she mentions, actually, it's not shown, even in the director's cut, she mentions, yeah, there was some other guy around here, some biker-looking guy asking for him. And then, so the T-1000, who's the cop in this scenario, she's like, what was that about? Or should I, does he have something to do with this?
I wouldn't worry about him.
I wouldn't worry about him. And he says it in this very cop way. Like, he knows how a cop would talk, which I thought was great.
He seemed way more human.
Yeah.
It could have very easily have been they sent back another human protector. The way they were painting it, or, setting it up, it could have gone that way. Yeah. And then the big reveal is that, John Connor's being chased by the T-1000, and then he sees the Terminator.
He runs into Arnold.
Terminator in, the coolest scene ever.
He pulls the shotgun out of the box of roses.
Oh my god. That is I love that scene.
And again, there's so many moments that this movie doesn't do something that a lesser movie would have. And I just imagine a Guns N' Roses song playing over that scene.
Well, that was John Connor's jam. He was listening to Guns N' Roses.
Oh,
there was more music in that. He had the radio on.
We're going to cut that out in post.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. Anyway, yeah, when he pulls the gun out of the roses, points it at John Connor, and you think, there's still a possibility in the, if you don't know anything outside of what you've seen on the screen, that Arnold is the bad guy, and the cop is the good guy, and then Arnold says, get down. He ducks, and he shoots him, and that's, you see he shoots the cop, the liquid metal Terminator, and just the...
That doesn't translate well to audio.
It doesn't. Yeah, we'll forget all that.
Basically, it's
just that inverse cone shape hole that bullets make in him, and you're like, what the fuck is this?
It's like if you throw a rock into a big puddle of mud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do a lot with kind of gloopy, slurpy sound effects with him in this movie.
Oh yeah. And screeching. He's a cool ass character.
He is. And they do really well with sound in this movie. Mm-hmm. And so that first time that he gets shot and kind of flings back a little bit, and then you see that there's just this hole of you don't know what it is at that point, but the liquid metal.
Yes. Which I have something to say about that later.
Yeah, that moment is the narrative reveal of, okay, the one who looks like the bad guy from the first one is the good guy now. And it's a really fun switcheroo.
It's a nice little Shyamalama ding-dong twist.
Yeah.
Except it's 30 minutes in.
Pretty much exactly 30 minutes in. And then I noticed the next real action sequence of the movie is in the mental institution, and it's about an hour in. No. They give you these nice little, you open with a laser space battle, you get the great, mall shootout chase scene with the truck that goes through the river canal, whatever the hell that thing is. I think it's the LA River.
I don't know.
But that whole scene is great. It's long. It doesn't feel long, but that whole mall fight car chase thing is, I think it was a good 8 or 10 minutes of just good action. And then they give you about 25 minutes of good plot building, character building, and then there's another action scene. After that mental institution action scene, there's a lot of plot. The movie kind of drags a little when it gets to the desert, and they're pontificating about fate.
But it jumps right into an assassination attempt.
Yes.
Which we'll talk more about that assassination attempt later.
Yeah. So...
But I didn't feel like it lingered too much. I felt like it was just enough time to give her little self-reflective moment and reflecting on the role that the Terminator is now playing in his life. I felt like the character development was interesting enough that I didn't mind the bulk of that in between action scenes.
Oh no, I never mind it. When the movie falters or does something that's imperfect, it's brief and forgivable. And when I say it dragged a little bit, all I mean is that it is the only point where you could even possibly think, at any point in the movie, it's the only time you could possibly think, okay, I'm done with this scene. What's next? Everything else is just right where it should be.
Well, you know what else dragged a little bit? Was the T-1000 when he was holding onto the back of the car.
Oh, and then Arnold gets out and he shoots the hook,
Yeah, I just meant that he dragged on the ground.
No, I know, but then he does the cool thing where he shoots his
shot,
arm.
He shot the arm.
Yeah.
And then John Connor picks up the little hook and throws it, and he's a little disgusted.
Well, no, it's great. Yeah, he treats it like it's gonna bite him.
Yeah.
He hesitates for a sec, and then he goes, ah!
Well, it's quite possible that it could have transformed into a small, I don't have his name in front of me, but the guy that played T-1000.
Oh, Robert Patrick.
Robert Patrick. Can you imagine if that little hook just morphed into a tiny Robert Patrick?
And he was like, hey, John Connor, you're gonna die! And there was just like a little, like, toy soldiers. Did you see that movie? About the action figures that come to life?
That movie was fantastic. That would be a great movie to go back and revisit, because I haven't seen it since I was a kid.
Same here.
And it had kind of adult themes in it, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it was PG-13, so you had to be over 13 to watch it.
Yeah.
So
I'd be down to revisit that movie.
I was definitely breaking the law. That was a fun moment, and it kind of you know how there's always an element to a horror movie. Not that this is one, but there's definitely horror-ish tropes here and there in the movie. There's always actions taken in a horror movie that make you look at the characters and go, no, why would you do that? And from the first time I saw this movie, I always thought they should have kept that little piece of his metal hook that stayed in the back of the car, because it might have like drained a little bit of his power or something. Kept him unwhole in a way. And then it kind of like, he tosses it on the ground, T-1000 walks up and like reabsorbs it into his shoe. And it's like, assimilation complete. You know, like, it was like they were giving him his strength back. And that always, it didn't bother me on a movie-making level, but I was just like, no, John, you dumb kid.
Well, what are you going to do?
Yeah, he's 10.
He's 10.
Or 14.
And, I mean, it wasn't a huge part of his body.
No, and it never comes back to bite them. It wasn't like it was something that mattered.
Would have been interesting if it did, though.
Yeah.
But, or like you said, if they had held onto it and that they tried to sabotage their vehicle or something.
But, you know, this is probably why I don't make movies, because I think that's another thing that the movie was better off not doing.
It would have been a little bit much.
Yeah, it would have been too much.
In a different movie, that would have been kind of a cool concept, but in this movie, it was unnecessary.
Yeah, you didn't need to do anything kind of artificially constructed onto the plot like that.
Yeah.
There's no...
would have been a cool concept, but just not for this movie.
Yeah. There's no damsel in distress. There's no MacGuffin. You know, we have to go and press this one button to solve all of our problems. The whole movie is trying to find that button. There's no useless time on screen.
No.
Really. There's so many things that Hollywood movies do to kind of spin their wheels and make sure they get 2 hours of runtime up there. You get your $11 worth.
No, the whole time was filled with good story, good action.
It was efficient.
It was an efficient movie.
Yeah.
There was never a time where I'm like, all right, let's go, let's move on.
It's well over 2 hours, but it's very efficient. I think about 90 seconds could have been cut out of the desert when they're dicking around getting guns from Enrique.
When Arnold Schwarzenegger picks up the child.
Yeah.
No, I like that scene. I thought that scene was
that needs
hilarious.
to stay in.
Yeah, we'll leave it in.
He looks at it like, what are you? They make little ones.
Yeah. Oh, they come in child.
Yeah.
Oh, they come in child.
They come in child. That's an option.
Yeah.
So the movie, it's paced very well, I guess is what we're saying.
Yeah.
And something that it does within that pacing, it develops the characters well. There's multiple character arcs going on.
Well, to the point where the T-1000 is gone for a good chunk of the movie, and you don't see what he's doing.
I paid attention.
I noticed it, but I didn't care.
I didn't care. I paid attention. I think he was off screen for over 45 consecutive minutes.
Well, he was going to all the possible places that John Connor would go, but we don't need to see that.
Yeah, we don't.
Because the Terminator, was talking about what action they should take and what they should not do based off of, well, that's what I would have done if I was trying to kill you.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I thought was really awesome.
It was great. It was like you knew that there was a chess match going on.
Yeah.
That, he says...
They had the same basic programming.
Yeah.
Kill John Connor.
He has all the same files I do. And
Where does he keep them? In his liquid?
That was something that I was thinking about as I was watching it. If everything is just this melty liquid, where's the processing happening in this thing?
It's a liquid processor.
It's a
prototype.
It's a
prototype.
neural network. It's future.
Why would they send a prototype in the Back to the Past?
Because it worked well enough. I don't know. Because the first one didn't work, so they want to try something new.
Because the director had means to make cool special effects.
Yeah.
Which that's fine.
When Arnold is describing the T-1000 to the kid after the mall scene, He refers to it as mimetic polyalloy. And I thought that was, with memes being such a big part of our culture in Web 3.0.
What is a meme?
A meme is a virus in our culture.
Oh my god.
Yeah, something that replicates itself.
I think they call that a repost.
Well, memes... Okay, we don't have to get into memes. You dickbag.
Sorry. We have to keep this light and funny as well, at times.
Knock, knock. Wait, no. Here, no. Let's reverse it. You start.
Ding dong.
Who's there?
T-1000. I'm looking for John Connor.
You can tell we're really good at jokes. So
getting anxiety.
It was just great because we all now know the word meme and what mimetic means. It means that it's something that replicates itself, and imitates other things. Memes always have a format, and then you play with the format. And it was a use of the word mimetic, imitates. And then you see that later. I believe you see the imitation for the first time. Oh, with the foster mother.
But it's not flattery.
It is the highest form of flattery.
Was it though?
No, she was dead.
Yeah, she didn't. She was dead. I thought it was funny that the T-1000 in that scene. I don't want to deviate from your point, but the T-1000 when he took the form of John's foster mother, felt it necessary to still make sure to prepare dinner. The first thing you see is that she's cutting vegetables, and she, being the T-1000, is cutting vegetables for dinner.
Well, that was something I thought was... It made perfect sense, because T-1000 only blew his cover and started killing people when it was most advantageous.
Yeah. And
at that point, the father, believing that she was just herself and was making dinner, could have been advantageous.
It could have been. It's funny imagery to me that a killing machine from the future is chopping onions in the kitchen in 1990. Was it supposed to take place in 1991?
No, I think at some point they mentioned that the end of the world is 3 years away. So if that was 97, I think the movie takes place in 94.
Okay. So Jurassic Park was out at that point.
It's true. In the world of Terminator 2,
which is probably why they had a... Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But it's probably why they had a dinosaur at... what was that? The computer company, DinoCore? No.
Cyberdyne. DinoCore.
Cyberdino.
Cyberdino-core.
Yeah. There was a brontosaurus for no reason at all. An inflated brontosaurus in the background of the lab at all times.
I'd like to think that's why, but that would mean that James Cameron could see 2 years in the future, which actually might be possible.
It's probably true.
Yeah, it's not just possible, it's probable.
Sorry, I totally interrupted, and now we're deviated, but I want you to try and... Where were we at?
Oh, you were talking about how funny it was that she is chopping vegetables in that scene.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is that was ostensibly to keep the stepfather in the dark in case he was going to be useful. But then he starts yelling about the dog barking, and then she just reaches out and impales his head against the fucking fridge.
You know why? Because that was an awesome scene.
It was just awesome. That was a case of,
through the milk, through his throat.
Yeah. And they don't show it happen. She just kind of looks over at him, lifts her arm, and you hear a shoop.
Yeah.
And then she continues talking on the phone, and Arnold pulls the gag where he imitates the kid's voice and asks what the dog is doing, but he uses the wrong name. He says, why is Wolfie barking, or what's wrong with Wolfie? And he just...
The dog's name was what, Max?
Max. Confirmed the dog's name is Max. And that's the trick. And as soon as she says, oh, Wolfie's fine, where are you? He hangs up and he's like, your foster parents are dead.
Yeah.
That was a great scene. It was foster parents had 2 scenes in the whole movie. One where they're yelling at him to clean his room. Oh, no, 3 scenes. One where she answers the door.
For the cop.
They're only in the movie as much as they need to be to let you know that they exist, that he's in foster care, and then, boom, your foster parents are dead. And guess who never gets mentioned again in the movie?
Well, he didn't give a shit about them.
Yeah, he didn't give a shit about him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's been through the rotation a few times. Like, they were talking about him, like, what were they saying? Like, I can't deal with this shit anymore. They were clearly frustrated, or they didn't seem like the greatest foster parent. Maybe they were all right. They didn't actually seem that bad.
No, they didn't paint them in a negative light. It was clearly difficult to deal with this kid who was raised the way he was.
I mean, he wasn't even cleaning his room. God. It was He was a trouble child. I mean, he was an asshole to them. He was not an easy kid to raise.
But think about how he was raised before he came into their house. I mean,
I can understand why.
That kid's gonna be fucked up.
Yeah.
And that was it was a great scene where he tricks the T-1000 into revealing himself by saying the wrong dog name.
Yeah.
And it's just, and their foster parents are out of the picture. And then only after he hangs up is it revealed. And for some reason, T-1000 has lingered here, and I think it was purely for cinematic effect. Mm-hmm. Lingered with the elongated metal arm through the guy's fucking mouth and head, impaling him there. And
if he had retracted it, then the body would have fallen on the ground.
And it would have
what was that? Yeah.
You're right. It wasn't. Yeah.
Sure.
You're right.
I'm sure it was also because it looked really cool.
It looked cool.
It looked really cool.
I mean, let's be honest. As much as you can dissect the cinematic quality of this movie as a film, it's also a really cool movie. I mean, it's got killer robots from the future fighting each other in like a battle of the fates.
Yes.
Literally.
There
a battle for the fate of humanity. It's just cool on top of being good.
There was another scene that was really cool that did not make sense.
No, what was
that? That always bugged me, even as a kid when I watched this movie. It was when the T-1000 is chasing them in a truck full of
liquid nitrogen.
Liquid nitrogen.
Yeah, this is nearing the climactic battle in the steel mill.
Yes,
which was a great set piece choice.
It really was, and that's another. That brings me to the third color. Of like orange and red. Oh,
this entire last half hour, we've only been talking about colors. These have all been sub-conversations of the color conversation.
Are they really?
I believe so. We're still only 2 colors deep. Let's get to number 3.
That was red and orange.
Red, orange. That's 4.
So there's blue.
Blue.
Which is a lot of the movie takes place at night, so it could be that. But blue is also supposed to represent like technology. Mm-hmm.
Like Tron.
But that didn't really fit with a lot of the scenes where Arnold is becoming a little bit more human.
They did a good job of slowly doing that, though. They didn't need to market when it was happening. It kind of happened slowly throughout the movie.
Which one of the best scenes in the movie is when he attempts to smile for the first time.
Oh, it's so good. Was that a director's cut scene or was that in the original?
I don't know. I think it was in the original because he smiles again later. After that point, there are like 2 other times where he gives a little smirk,
and it
was meant to establish that he now knows how to do it.
He's learning.
He's learning.
Yeah.
So it was blue, white for the mental institution, and then red and orange for the steel mill. And the scene, since I've got that last color out of the way, which we'll talk about the steel mill, I'm sure in greater detail at some point. The scene that I'm talking about that visually was really cool, but did not make any sense, that annoyed me as a child, was when the truck knocks over and starts spilling the liquid nitrogen on the ground, and then the T-1000 freezes.
Yeah.
And a scene where he's like trying to walk, he's so determined to fulfill his goal of killing John Connor, like he's walking and he's losing his feet, and he's just... to the point where he freezes. And the scene was really cool, but didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, is that Arnold, at that point, shoots him, which he could have just left him frozen and they would have had plenty of time. They could have lifted him up frozen and put him
into the lava.
Yeah, they could have...
the molten steel.
I mean, that's just one of those things where I'm overthinking it. But the reason for that scene was that it looked cool.
Well, I think the real reason for that scene was so that Arnold could use the slang he was taught earlier in the movie and go, "Hasta la vista, baby." And then shoot him and he shatters, and it was really cool.
Logic was not a big part of that scene.
It was a Hollywood action movie moment.
And that was okay. Well, no, it still kind of bothers me.
What bothered me about that scene is that you see molten steel leaking down the side of a vat or something in the background of the scene.
Unsafe work environment.
Super unsafe work environment because, the truck had just crashed, so maybe the truck has cracked the side of something. But
it was 1994. It was a different time.
And then there's no molten steel on the ground later, even though you see it leaking down the side. That was the part that bothered me in that scene. That's funny.
We had 2 different...
Was that the worst scene in the movie?
It looked cool as hell.
It looked cool as hell.
I think that's the big takeaway, is that it looked cool as hell.
Actually, you know what happened right before that, though, that I noticed is as they're driving the truck, they're running away from the liquid nitrogen truck, and they're in the gardener's truck, which is great.
Yeah.
With a top speed of 60 miles an hour.
This is as fast as it goes.
This is the vehicle's top speed. It's like, and the speedometer needle, when he says that, is like oscillating across like 5 miles an hour on the gauge. Like, this is just...
It was tapped out.
Like, this truck needed... The gardener, clearly his business was not thriving, because he was driving a piece of shit truck.
He was, and the truck was even empty. Imagine if you had all your gardening tools in the back.
Yeah.
It would have... It probably would have been... Yeah.
But anyway, what I was going to say, talking about the whole liquid nitrogen part being the worst scene in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Arnold is kind of surfing on the truck after it is toppled. No, that part's badass.
No, I love that part.
It's great. He's surfing on the truck. It's skidding on its side. And then when the truck crashes and breaks open and Arnold is kind of flung from it, it was the worst CGI of the movie. It was a CGI Arnold flying off the truck.
Was it really?
Oh, it was. It had to have been.
I may have been taking notes at that time, and I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch that.
It had to have been because it looked. It was one of two. I can only count two. One of two times in the movie that a visual thing on screen looked bad. The other time was in the scene where Arnold is on the motorcycle up above the river, above the canal, while John Connor's being chased in that first post-mall chase scene.
Yeah.
He drives the bike off the ledge, down into the ravine. There's a slow-motion shot of him from the front. It's a stuntman.
Oh, yeah, it looks terrible.
And it looks terrible.
Well, he also takes John Connor from his little...
Oh, when he grabs him off his dirt bike.
That was, if you look at the driver of the motorcycle...
It's a stuntman there, too.
It is absolutely a stuntman.
But, at that point, there's two motorcycles and a truck on screen. There's two different characters on screen, and it's done at full speed.
Yeah.
I forgive it there, although I noticed that too. When he does the slow motion, note to all aspiring filmmakers, if you're going to do a slow motion shot where your character's face is in the shot, use the real actor.
Or,
Or do it from behind.
Maybe he should have had a motorcycle helmet up until that point.
Or something. I mean, just takes me out of the movie so badly when that happens.
Yeah. What about the use of dummies? Did that ever take you out?
No.
There were a handful.
No, because they don't show the face.
That's true.
And these are machines we're talking about, so they can look like dummies. It's a robot. It's fine.
Fair enough.
But after he's ejected from the nitrogen truck and after he's been surfing on it, it's you should watch it again. I'm
gonna rewatch that.
It was bad CGI or something, and then I think it was a dummy as he's sliding on the ground, but that's fine because he's in like a tuck and roll position. And who cares? Yeah. He's a robot. And
your eyes kind of drawn elsewhere during that scene, being the big old truck.
The big old truck exploding.
Yeah, there's enough to draw your eye away from.
So I think what we're taking away from this, if nothing else, is that the most iconic scene in the movie, the liquid nitrogen freezing, hasta la vista baby getting shot and exploding and then melting and then reforming, is the worst scene in the movie.
Yeah, but it makes for the best catchphrase of the movie.
It does, but it's almost proof that pandering is bad for your movies. Trying to be cool is bad for the movie. You should just be cool instead of trying to be cool.
Yeah, they could have thrown in Hasta La Vista somewhere else. Like when at the very end, when Arnold is coming up on a giant gear,
yeah,
with a grenade launcher in his hand, he this is how the movie ends.
He doesn't say anything when he shoots.
He doesn't.
Does he?
He doesn't say. That would have been a good in terms of like for an action movie.
Like a catchphrase.
That would have been a great time to throw in a witty little catchphrase.
Although I will say
you won't be back.
That would have
been really bad.
That would have been bad. But if that was Hasta La Vista, baby, it would have worked.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it would have been as good as it was because at that point, this is the very end of the movie. Sarah Connor is pumping the shotgun and pumping T-1000 full of lead, and he's being knocked back towards the molten steel pit. And then as he's nearing the edge, she runs out of ammo. Just one bullet too soon. And it's such a heroic, triumphant scene as she's shooting him. And then she runs it, and she cocks the shotgun a few times, hoping against hope that there's like a magical bullet going to appear in there. And she'd click a couple more times, no bullet. And then Robert Patrick, T-1000, he realizes that she's out of ammo. He looks at her and just wags his finger at her in this, like, he's a snarky little robot.
He's charismatic.
Yeah.
He's got a lot going on.
He does. And then Arnold appears almost Deus Ex Machina style, although they've revealed that he's not actually dead, and he's gonna, he's going to come back and save the day.
If they had let that scene out, it would have been very...
The scene where he reroutes to backup power.
Yeah, exactly.
Right before that, yeah. So it was such like a very powerful, like, heroic, triumphant moment when she's shooting him with the shotgun, and then just a plummet down to despair when she runs out of ammo, and then this heroic, triumphant return of Arnold, and he blows him up. If that had been Hasta La Vista, baby, it kind of would have broken the mood. It was pretty serious by that point. That was a very emotionally charged scene, and to be broken with a one-liner joke might have not been the best idea.
I mean, they could have fit it in somewhere else. They could have. I mean, the movie is what it is, and that scene will always be there, and it'll always irk me a little bit, but it doesn't ruin the movie for me.
No, this movie is far from ruined. This movie's an A. It's not an A-. Like, any flaws it has, don't even knock it down to A-.
There is one big plot hole. I mean, we're probably not gonna go into time travel too much.
Well, time travel
that's gonna be that's like a whole podcast in and of itself, is the time travel in this franchise. It's kind of a cluster.
It's nonsensical.
It's nonsensical, and
I don't care.
We're not. Yeah, I'm gonna pretend like this movie ends at 2. This franchise ends at 2.
Yeah, that's how I think of it as well. And you know what? The first two were James Cameron written and directed by. It was his vision of what the story should be.
The third one was not.
The third one was a cash grab. It was made 10, 13 something years after this one came out.
Arnold is not looking too good in that movie. He's aging. He's looking his age in that.
Isn't he barely? Oh, that's the fourth one. He's barely in.
It was right before he became governor of California, because they used the scene where he smashes the female Terminator's head into a toilet and said that he hates women.
In the election?
Yeah. They tried to use that movie against him, and that scene was controversial. But anyway,
that was a weird time.
It was a weird time, but
we're from California here. And just so you know, we were old enough to follow that as it was happening. The recall of Governor Gray Davis being replaced by Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was a funny time in our lives.
Gary Coleman also was.
Gary Coleman was. He ran.
He ran.
He got publicity.
He didn't run. He didn't get very far. Might be because of his little legs.
Ooh, little person joke.
Gary Coleman joke.
Yeah, that's fine then. He does have small legs.
He does have small legs. I don't think he's a little person, is he?
No, it's a different condition. I forget what it's called, but it's...
Yeah, I'm making fun of whatever his condition is.
Yeah, which is more rare, so less people can be affected.
Yeah, so who cares?
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm gonna go... the only thing I'm gonna say about time travel in this movie is that I'm going with the idea that... and I'm gonna read a quote from Kyle Reese in the really bad scene from the director's cut. "The future is not written. There is no fate but what we make for ourselves."
That's not even just a quote from him. They quote him saying that even in multiple times later in the movie.
I know that John Connor does.
John Connor says it in full to the Terminator after...
when he finds out that his mom went to go kill...
It's as they're figuring out that she's going to assassinate Miles Dyson, who's a character we've not talked about yet.
Who's a character that he was the most relatable character. He was a family man. He was like a genuinely nice guy.
Yep, he just wanted to make humanity better and prevent plane crashes.
All of his work was going for the betterment of humankind.
Or he thought so.
Well, that was his intention, is what I mean. Like,
yeah.
And like, that's a big thing to be dropped on you, that
you're going to kill humanity.
That you're going to kill humanity on like this work you've been doing for, well, I guess 10 years, since you were given a strange robot arm in a weird CPU chip.
And told, just don't ask where it comes from.
Don't ask where it comes from. Just
don't worry about it. Just make the Terminators.
Yeah, you don't ask questions.
No.
I liked him a lot.
I did too.
I felt for him a lot as well. And there's a really cool scene where, so Sarah Connor decides, I'm going to change the future. I'm going to rewrite the future by killing the person responsible for Skynet.
Yeah, the person who she previously in one of our mini car scenes asked Arnold.
It's another payoff moment where you find out about him, and then I guess you'd also been seeing scenes of him.
No, I think that was director's cut. You hadn't seen him yet.
Oh, okay.
In the theatrical version, the one where it shows where his wife is bugging him to go to Raging Waters with the kids. I think that was director's cut.
Well, the scene before that was him in the lab where he.
You're right. You had seen him in the lab one time.
Where you see, and that's one thing that you could kind of put together yourself, but if you had seen the first movie, I guess it would make more sense. Is that in the first movie, the Terminator is destroyed by a hydraulic press, and one arm is reaching out
of the press.
Sarah Connor, and it gets crushed. And
that's a great scene.
It's such a good scene. But someone had acquired that arm, as well as the CPU chip from the machine's head.
Deep in the skull.
And it had gone to Cyberdyne, where this guy, Miles Dyson, was developing some brand new
world-changing AI.
World-changing AI that can learn. But, what were we talking about? How did we get to this point?
Well, we were talking about when Sarah Connor decides she's going to go murder him. She's going to murder him.
She's going to murder him, and
so
he is the most Terminators. And of all the characters we've seen so far, he is the most human.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, the dynamic. When she goes to kill him, she is essentially becoming that which she has fought or obsessed over for the past 10 years.
She looks like a guerrilla fighter.
She's like a mercenary assassin.
Or a chimpanzee fighter.
She's a chimp warrior. But then there's a moment where she has him at gunpoint, and his son is like on top of him.
Yeah, don't kill my daddy!
Yeah, she shoots him in the shoulder, and he's lying there defenseless, and his loving wife and his loving children are like all trying to protect him, and no one knows what's going on. He has no idea why this woman's trying to kill him.
Psychopath is just trying to murder him.
And then she has this moment of clarity where she's holding the gun to his head, saying, like, you're the reason for everything. That I think she realizes that, oh my God, I've lost my humanity and I've become that which
She was there to terminate
and hate. She was there to terminate. She became like a Terminator. She was like a Terminator.
Yeah, she was.
And
she breaks down crying and doesn't kill him, but this is only after she meant to shoot him in the spine and missed.
Well, it's like with any warfare where if you're firing at a distance and you hit someone, it has less of an impact than if you were to kill someone face to face.
That's true.
Where you see the humanity in them.
She realizes it when she's fighting the urge to kill him. She still probably wants to, and she's venting, and she says, "It's all your fault. It's all your fault." And he's so confused. He looks so sad and confused, looking at his death, right? He's looking at this woman who wants to kill him. She's about to kill him.
Yeah.
And so she's saying, "It's all your fault." And he just says something like, "What is?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, he's not bad. He doesn't know." And she just like curls in a ball crying. And then John and Arnold, they come to try to stop her. It's too late to stop her. She already was either going to do it or not. I love that they didn't have this hokey moment of John Connor,
standing between them or
hitting
something.
the gun out of her hand at the last second as she's about to shoot and go, "No, Mom!"
She came to her own conclusion on her own.
Yeah.
That was good. It would have been hollow if she had been her mind had been changed by someone else rather than by herself.
Yeah.
Like,
Again, the movie, it does characters right.
It does.
And really, whether it's a novel or a movie or a TV show, like, characters are the heart of any good story.
Yes.
And the fact that the actor, being Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Terminator itself being the same as the soulless, mindless killing machine of the first movie, the fact that that character is the most changed, along with maybe Sarah Connor, but the most changed over the course of this movie, from just, we must complete mission objective, to a fairly humanized.
You mean from the guy who almost killed two random dudes trying to help? That was when it was clear that he was still a Terminator, which I have a theory. The sunglasses. and their meaning in this, because they make a point of showing them being stepped on and crushed.
Was that supposed to be like the...
I think that was from him being a Terminator to him, then with John
being humanized.
Kind of humanized. It was the start of his transition, because initially he wore the glasses in like, let's say, the first Terminator to hide the red glow of his eyes. Like it was a dehumanizing tool.
Yeah.
And that's what it represented, especially when in the first movie he ends up losing his human eye, or his prosthetic eye entirely. He cuts it out, and then he has to wear the sunglasses so that he can still walk around.
That was a gruesome scene in that original when he's digging the eyeball out of his skull.
It was fantastic.
That was great.
But
Is that the same scene where he goes, "Fuck you, asshole"?
Where he's looking through,
looking through his responses.
Yeah, that was all right. So, for anyone listening, watch Terminator 1 too. It was also It was also quite good. I mean, it's not the topic of our discussion today, but we keep mentioning it. It's worth a watch. Absolutely,
it really is. And if Terminator 2 is an A, Terminator is like a B plus A minus. It's still a great movie.
It's also just a different type of movie.
It is.
So if you can't grade it based off of the score of Terminator 2 because it's a different type of movie. But I would still give it that grade.
Yeah.
I'd give it like a B plus.
One of the reasons that we decided that Terminator 2 is perhaps the best sequel of all time is because it took a good original movie and became a lot better.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of sequels to great movies that were still also great. I mean, the number one example, Aliens on top of Alien, we're both of the opinion that Alien is also one of the best sci-fi or horror movies ever made.
I think it's my favorite horror movie, possibly.
It's my favorite horror movie. It is. Another great example would be The Godfather Part 2. It's widely viewed as the worthy and equal successor to The Godfather, one of the greatest movies of all time.
I'm surprised our first movie mentioned wasn't Empire Strikes Back.
That was my next one, was Empire Strikes Back, sequel to Star Wars.
But you would have had to have seen the first Star Wars movie for it to have the impact that it did.
Empire Strikes Back makes no sense if you haven't seen Star Wars. A New Hope.
Most of these movies, I mean, Aliens would do...
Aliens stands on its own as well.
It does somewhat... Yeah, no, it does.
No, it really does, because there's this scene where she's in the boardroom and she explains the entire first movie to the like Inquisition.
I guess that scene only took like 3 minutes.
Yeah, and then it's just
was enough.
Yeah.
Sigourney.
She's a treasure.
I have a framed photo of Sigourney in her space outfit from Aliens,
just smiling, just beaming,
just smiling on my desk because I'm a nerd and I love Sigourney Weaver. She's fantastic.
So, anyway, back to
how did we start talking about Sigourney?
She's a treasure.
She's a treasure.
She's fantastic. We shouldn't downplay her importance in the universe of film.
I can say for sure that at some point we will be talking about one of the Alien movies.
Alien Resurrection.
Alien Resurrection. Exactly, with Winona Ryder.
Yeah.
That was probably the best entry of the franchise. Terminator 2.
Terminator 2 is unique among sequels, in my opinion, in how much better it was than the original, while the original was such a good movie.
Yes.
There's great sequels to great movies. There's really good sequels to bad movies. And there's bad sequels to good movies, of course, but it's rare to find an all-time great sequel to a really good original movie. And the disparity in quality is wide, but the original was fantastic still on its own. In its own right. And that's a big part of what kind of appealed to us and drew us to Terminator 2 as the subject of this podcast, was how much it was able to take a good movie and become great on top of that.
Yeah.
Using the themes and concepts of the original without really needing to rely on the original to be its own movie. It completely stands alone as well.
Yes. And I just wanted to throw out a fun fact. I don't think that $100 million, that was the budget for this movie, was $100 million.
Okay.
Which they ended up making, I believe, like $530 million in the box office.
So it was a success.
It was a success. But I decided I'd look up movies from the 1990s that had a budget of $100 million.
Oh, what else did you find?
I'm only going to mention one, and that is Batman Forever. So think about what they did with $100 million compared to what Terminator 2 was able to do with $100 million.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Terminator 2 was...
There's a lot of destruction. A lot of cars, which were probably junkyard cars, I'm sure.
There was a lot of destruction, but a lot of it was very well executed stunt work, practical effects.
Mm-hmm.
The dream or flash forward that she has of the nuclear holocaust is clearly miniatures.
Oh, yeah. That's actually the next point I wanted to talk about with you, was the use of effects. But finish your thought first.
Well,
Sorry, I interrupted
they
you.
had fantastic computer effects, but they actually were used fairly sparingly.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Oh, I read your mind.
I think it may have had something to do with the fact that the computer-generated graphics or images was a bit expensive at the time because it was new. Later on, it became cheap.
And it took like a year to render 1 second of that stuff. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but I mean, just the time.
No, it took a long time. So, but it worked really well for this movie. For that character, obviously, there were a lot of scenes. I think almost all of the CGI was
the T-1000 character.
Just the T-1000 character doing cool stuff like walking through a bar door,
or before that, coming up from the floor.
But that
was great.
That led to one of my favorite practical effects, which was when he stabbed the security guard that he was mimicking in the face. Once he does that, it shows the guard's face, and it's clearly like a replica, but it looks really good.
It does.
And there's also a combination of
as he's just spasming horrifically.
It
was a brutal movie. But it never lingered on the brutality. It wasn't gore porn.
No.
And it wasn't particularly...
Most of the scenes with any kind of gory scene was all kind of done just to show off the effects of the T-1000. More so than...
Or to show the heartlessness of the character.
Yeah. It was all about... Yeah. Exactly.
It had a reason. It wasn't just there to be a gory action scene.
Yeah. And there was minimal blood.
Yeah. Quite minimal. Actually, I was a little surprised watching it for the first time in several years at how minimal the blood and gore is, and some of the most brutal, disquieting scenes don't have any gore, like when the T-1000, in another show-off special effect moment, he drives a motorcycle out of the building in the Cyberdyne scene, latches onto the helicopter that was out there,
pours himself
headbutts the window in, and then pours himself in, looks over at the pilot, and says, "Get out."
Yeah.
And then the pilot just jumps. He's dead.
That dude's dead.
That guy's dead. But he would rather jump to his death than deal with whatever just poured into his helicopter.
Yeah.
But that's a brutal scene. A guy literally commits suicide, and it's also one of the funnier moments of the movie. Get out. And he gets out.
Would you call that dark humor?
That's a little dark.
But they did a really good job with practical effects. Like a lot of the times when the T-1000 would get shot, what they did was they just kind of put the bullet holes were made and stuck to him. So when you saw him get shot, it would be it would cut to him right after he got shot, where he's reacting to it.
His shoulder flings back and then comes back.
But they had it was pretty clear that they had put things on him to make it look like liquid metal bullet holes.
It must have just been a green sticker, like a green screen, and then they just paint on liquid metal.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good use of effects. It worked, and I'm sure it wasn't too expensive.
It was just little green splotches.
And another scene I noticed that was really well done, that utilized a lot of the editing and camera work, was when Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm just going to call him Arnie. So when Arnie's coming out of the Cyberdyne building, when the SWAT team's coming in, right? Mm-hmm. And they're shooting tear gas.
And bullets.
Down the whole... Well, initially it's just tear gas.
Yeah, that's true.
And then he emerges from the gas looking like a badass, of course.
He's Arnold.
And they open fire. They did a really good job of, in editing of... Because it would have been really difficult to show Arnie getting shot in the face, and having skin be removed, exposing his metal skeleton. But the way they did it was a lot of quick cuts where it would suddenly cut to his face and it shows him reacting to being hit by the bullet, but the exposed endoskeleton is there.
Mm-hmm.
If you just, it's hard to explain, but if you rewatch the scene and how they cut it, they do a really good job with a scene that would have been really difficult to do otherwise.
They just were adding prosthetics and makeup in between the cuts, essentially.
Yeah. And when it worked seamlessly, it was flawless.
Yeah.
But it's just an example of the ingenuity of editing and effects and what you can do with a camera when the either technology or the resources are not available to you to do any other way.
It was also a really important scene just for his character arc of becoming more human. This is probably the main theme of the movie is Arnold, the T-800 or whatever the hell we've been calling him. Arnold's Terminator becomes more human over the course of the movie. And
yes.
a big, probably the biggest single contributor to that is when police have all shown up at Cyberdyne, and he says he's going to go take care of it, and John Connor goes, "You swore!" because he swore he wouldn't kill anybody.
Yeah.
And he turns around and he smirks.
Trust me.
Trust me is all he says. He doesn't explain it like a computer would and go, "I will not kill anybody because I have been..." He just says...
Like he would have done at the beginning of the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
He just says, "Trust me." With a smirk.
With another instance of him using his little smile.
Yep, and then he destroys all the police cars with a minigun, which was also a great comedic moment when the helicopter. He's, put your hands up. Oh my god, that's a damn minigun! Like, over the megaphone, he's panicking. And he destroys all their cars, and he hurts nobody.
Yeah.
He just destroys all the cars and makes them flee and panic.
He does his little scan with his, here's a term that I learned today. I used to call it 80s future tech. The term is retrofuturism, which is a representation of what someone thought the future was going to be in whatever time
in the past.
In the past. So in the 80s, you see it a lot in like Alien, and I love it. Alien.
The computer that goes
Blade
like ticka 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 as it's putting characters up on the screen.
Yes, I love it. I love that sound. It was
Blade
Runner. Blade Runner's full of it, and Terminator as well. When you see through his eyes.
The red-tinted Terminator POV.
Yeah. Which is really interesting when you watch it now on DVD or Blu-ray or digital, being able to pause. I had a lot of fun with that when I was
just
watching
reading
this.
all of the readouts that he's got on his screen.
I think the last time I saw this movie was on VHS. And when you pause on VHS... I guess I could have done it. I maybe didn't really think about it because it didn't matter. But this time around, I paused the Cyberdyne minigun grenade launcher scene. It says 0 casualties as he scanned.
Human casualties 0.0.
Yeah.
Which I thought was great because it means he didn't even sever any limbs in that minigun assault.
So is that what a fraction of a casualty is?
If it had said 0.5, yeah, if it was said 0.5, I would have assumed somebody lost the use of their legs or something,
Yeah.
But it was 0.0. He was a perfect ofer on that.
I think it's just that anything sounds or looks cooler.
And it is more computery.
It is more computery. Yes.
So there's 0.0 casualties there, which is great because he's just spraying the parking lot with a minigun that shoots some inordinate amount of bullets per second. Then the next scene of any sort of fighting, he kneecaps every police officer with his pistol. They all are going to be in pain for the rest of their lives.
But they'll live.
They'll live.
He was only told not to kill.
Right, and in that case, it was more important to disable them because John and Sarah had to escape with their gas masks from the elevator. It was a choke point. They had to get past the cops. I just thought it was great that when he's spraying hundreds, thousands of bullets into this parking lot, he doesn't hurt a fly.
Yeah.
Then the next scene, he kind of digresses a little bit when he's just kneecapping everybody.
It's effective.
But it was a fun scene because then the last one he hasn't fucked up, kind of like realizes that he's not dealing with a human being and turns and flees. And Arnold still just shoots him in the back with the gas canister just to fuck him up.
Yeah. What about where he starts launching the gas canisters in the parking lot and the last guy he encounters, who's like right by the truck that he needs, is wearing the gas mask, and he hands him the tear gas launcher, says, hold this, and then he just takes his mask off casually.
Yeah, and he starts choking
on the tear gas.
Yeah.
It's another one of those comedic scenes. Like, it's peppered in.
Yeah, the comedy's never overdone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even when it is there, like, hold this, it was for a purpose. It was to distract his hand so he could tear his gas mask off. Like, it's never there just to be funny.
Yeah, no. It fits the scene.
And really, that's one of the main strengths of the movie overall. That's why it is such a strong movie, is because every scene, every line, every action is serving something greater than itself. It's serving the story, or it's developing a character. The movie has a direction, and it sticks to it.
Yeah.
There's point A at the beginning, there's point B at the end. And you never jump to point Z and point R and point 4.
In between, you have a lot of reoccurring bits. What you'd call them scenes that end up with a payoff, a setup and a payoff.
There's a lot of setup and payoff.
I was going to say when Arnold is acquiring a car with John Connor, and he basically rips open the front panel, and then John Connor tips open the sun visor and the keys fall down.
It's like, are you learning?
And then later on,
he's about to do it. He's about to tear it.
He's in the SWAT car and he's about to tear off the panel, and then he looks up at the sun visor and pulls it down, and the keys fall down.
And the keys are there, and that's a great moment.
But it happens, like, fairly often.
Yeah, it does. It happens throughout the movie. I think a different kind of payoff, not so much a characterization payoff like that one was, and that was one of the best in the movie, was when they're driving the gardener's truck, being chased by the liquid nitrogen. We're back towards the end of the movie now. He's shooting grenades at the liquid nitrogen truck, and then the truck rams the gardening truck, rams the one our characters are in, and he drops the grenade launcher with one grenade in it.
Yeah.
And he tries to reach it. He can't. The truck ends up crashing. The gun goes flying. That gun has one grenade left in it for like 20, 25 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And he's constantly trying to get it. Like when him and the T-1000 are fighting in the steel mill, and he's getting his head smashed with the steel beam.
The last thing he sees before he shuts down is his hand reaching for the grenade launcher.
He's crawling away, just trying to get that damn grenade launcher, and then he gets the metal pole shoved through his back, and there's the lightning effect. And he kind of powers down. You think maybe he's dead, and his hand has almost reached that grenade launcher, and you're like, man, he really wants that grenade, and I can't believe he never got it. And then it finally pays off. That grenade is
in the final scene.
The final scene, the one we talked about earlier, where she's shotgunning him and runs out of shotgun shells. He has the one grenade left, and he finally got that grenade launcher back that he dropped in the back of the truck a half hour ago. And he shoots his last grenade into the T-1000. It explodes him. He turns into a grotesque, split in half, screeching monster.
Which was awesome.
It was awesome, with the head sideways and just flailing around, and he falls into the molten steel, and that's how he... And then the whole, like, prolonged death scene, it was a proper monster death in horror movie terms. And he's, screeching like an inhuman demon, and before he finally just breaks up into his little molten pieces. But yeah, that grenade launcher was dying to be paid off.
Oh, yeah.
The entire climactic scene, it finally did.
It's great. You know what? I didn't even notice that.
Really?
I did not notice that.
Oh my god, that grenade launcher is like an itch you just want to scratch.
That was a great payoff. I mean, we've been praising this movie a lot, but there's one thing that really I don't think I'd ever noticed until today.
Is it praise or criticism?
It's criticism. Well, at some point Arnold gets stuck in some gears.
When his arm
gets stuck in some gears.
Right before, and then he goes full 127 hours on it and chops his own arm off?
Yeah.
Or wrenches his arm out of there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So fast forward to the end. He has to destroy himself, the chip in his brain. But he leaves his arm.
Does that come back in Terminator 3? I never saw the third one.
I don't know.
Is that how they still made Terminators?
I think that the whole point of Terminator 3 was that mankind is inevitably going to create a self-aware computer, no matter what happens.
But okay, tell me, in the third one...
I don't remember that well, because it sucked, and it was terrible.
But does it happen in 1997 just the same as it's described in this movie? Or did they at least...
I don't care.
Did they at least delay it?
Terminator 3 didn't happen. We're just going to ignore Terminator 3 because it was a terrible movie. But it's just like, it's one of those things that I don't know if it was intentional, like maybe James Cameron was opening up the possibility of a third movie, or if it was just overlooked.
I think it was just
overlooked.
Or
maybe it was assumed that it was destroyed by the gears.
off camera. Maybe they grabbed it too. I don't know.
Because it looked, he mangled it pretty bad.
Here's what I was.
But it was like, that's still future tech.
I think the chip was far more important than the arm.
It really was.
What I noticed in the movie is that there's and this kind of leads me to believe that it was just overlooked and not trying to set up a sequel. There's the scene where it's revealed through like their interrogation with Miles Dyson after his near assassination that the chip and the arm from the original, we already know as viewers because we see it way sooner, way earlier in the lab, but it's revealed to the characters that they did in fact get the chip and the arm from the first Terminator, and Sarah Connor has this light bulb moment where she just goes, "Son of a bitch, I knew it, those lying motherfuckers." And like her frustration there is great, but that kind of is a scene that is, it's like a circle of time it's referring to. The chip from the future comes in the past and creates the technology that becomes the chip in the future that comes to the past. There's a circle to it.
Yeah, depending on how you look at the time travel, whether or not we're not going to get too.
Right after that scene, though, there's this shot where they're driving to Cyberdyne from Miles Dyson's house, but the shot is just the road going by. Like it's like the camera's on the front of a car.
Yeah, where
and the road is
unfamiliar waters,
and that
territory, whatever.
And right after a scene that highlights the cyclical or circular nature of time in this series, you get a shot where the camera is moving in a straight line, where the road's rushing past, and you get the sense that you're never going back, right?
So heavy.
So right after a circle, you get a straight line to show that the circle can be broken. That was how I saw that scene.
Oh.
It was a visual cue that the inevitable destruction, the cycle of violence that humanity is forever locked into until we spiral out of control. Everything is this unavoidable wheel of time. The scene broken. Right after it is just the camera flying down the road in a straight line. Wow. To go destroy Cyberdyne and break the cycle by turning time back into a line that we can direct. And then, at the end of the movie, after everybody gets destroyed, the final shot of the movie with the voiceover of Sarah Connor saying, perhaps we as humans can learn the value of human life. If a Terminator can, maybe we can too. That voiceover is done over a duplicate of that shot of flying down the road.
Okay.
And to me, that was a callback to the point in the movie where they realized how much agency they really have. You didn't have to murder somebody to change the future. You just had to change the future. You can just destroy the building. You can, incinerate the computers that have the data.
Yeah.
That was where the characters, really got onto the final climactic trajectory of, okay, this is how we stop it. This is how we change the future.
Yeah.
And then they repeated that shot in the straight line down the road, flying down the road at the end of the movie, saying that humans can learn the value of our own lives. And so I don't think they intended for there to be a sequel where it goes back into the circle of humanity being destroyed.
And then they hit a roundabout, and then they go back in a circle.
I think the sequels were cash grabs. I think we were intended to think at the end of this that Judgment Day was averted. That was how I interpreted it, and when the sequels came out and I realized that it was just going to go off into the exact same future that we always knew it would be.
The sequels just shit all over Terminator 2. It's like, oh, remember all the great parts of Terminator 2? They don't matter. Everything that they did, it was all meaningless. That movie is meaningless. So I think we've gone over most of the points. We've talked a lot about this. How do you feel about closing thoughts? Is there something else you wanted to discuss?
Well, we've kind of hit on a lot of the things that I truly enjoyed about the movie. I guess I would just want to reiterate if we're closing.
Yeah,
right now.
Just closing general feelings and thoughts on yours.
Oh, this is not a closing thought, but it is something else I wanted to mention that we haven't talked about. I know you enjoyed this aspect of it too. The soundtrack to this movie is not normal.
No.
A lot of the action scenes, including the entire climactic steel mill scene, are done with this very minimalist, pulsating soundtrack that just kind of is like a kind of effect.
It's atmospheric.
It's atmospheric, but it's very tempting when you have these big, flashy, special effects laden shots and scenes to have big crash bang, highly charged soundtracks. And this movie just let it have a dread-building, tense minimalism to the soundtrack that I thought really served the film. And I just wanted to mention that before we finished up.
Let's give credit to Brad Fidel Castro. Oh, shit. I thought that he did a really good job. There was another scene where it was almost like a percussion beat that sounded like a metallic heartbeat, like the heartbeat of a cyborg. Though at the time it was showing Sarah Connor. No, Arnie was there too. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it was very rhythmic and it felt like a robot heartbeat.
Even if they were both on screen, we already talked about how Sarah Connor is almost more Terminator than the Terminator at certain points in this movie.
At that point, they were both pretty Terminator. He was just following orders given by John Connor. He had not yet had the ability to learn. I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do.
Okay, I'm glad you said that.
Because we almost forgot it?
We almost forgot it. And that would have been a travesty if we talked for as long as we've talked about Terminator 2 and not mentioned the line, I know now why you cry, but it is something I can never do. Because
it's another setup and payoff moment.
It is, because earlier he...
John Connor says, and I quote, crying is when nothing's wrong with you, but you hurt anyways. And then later on, at the end of the movie...
He's crying.
He understands, I know now why you cry.
Yeah.
But
it is something I can never do.
That's how I feel about...
When you murder hookers?
Terminator 3.
Oh, scratch that.
Yeah.
No, I'm really glad you said that. We didn't wrap up before we brought that up because I think in a movie that is, it's well done. It has a lot of heart. Sometimes it's a little bit ham-fisted heart, but still.
Fine.
That line, it hits me.
Resonates?
It resonates.
Yeah.
That's the word. It allows you to truly believe that the machine you've been watching kind of humanize has actually been doing that, but also still lets you know that it's still a terminating, killing machine.
Yeah.
It stops halfway in a way that is satisfying because of how believable it is.
Yeah, and it shows that while he does have an understanding of emotion, he is still a machine.
It's still just an understanding.
It's not something that he can authentically...
The Terminator's heart didn't just grow 3 sizes that day like the Grinch, and he sprouts spontaneous tear ducts, and he gives John Connor a kiss on the forehead. Like, it doesn't go schmaltzy.
What a twist.
What a twist!
That would have been fantastic.
Oh, right? No, it does a great job of only going as far as it needs to, and that's true plot-wise, character-wise, emotion-wise, action-wise. There's actually probably only a quarter of the running time is like action scenes.
Yeah.
There's extended sections where characters talk and develop and argue and plot. And
well, I mean, that one line sums up his character development.
Yeah.
Pretty well.
It's great. And then right after that line, right after he says the I know now why you cry line, and then it's like, hey, I cannot self-terminate, you have to lower me into the steel. He shakes Sarah Connor's hand.
Yeah.
And she wholeheartedly or
isn't she the one that puts her hand out first? Like, she
so.
Initiates the handshake.
You might be right.
The machine that tried to kill her 10 years prior.
And that's her character arc, is her going from survival only... ends always justifying the means. She's willing to murder this guy in front of his family, to understanding the nuances of the situation enough to give a goodbye, give a handshake to this machine that John viewed as a friend and a father, and that she viewed as a heartless, mindless killing machine. She shakes his hand.
Well, in the same way that she thinks that maybe humanity can change, he was like the example.
He was the example to her. He went from being the object of her complete and utter terror the first time he walks on the screen.
That's a major closure.
Yeah. No, the movie wraps up everything it needs to.
Yeah.
In a way that really precludes the possibility of any sequels really realistically being made.
Well, that didn't happen.
I know. There was Terminator 2, and that was the end of the franchise.
Yeah, I'm glad that there were only 2 movies that were ever made.
Did we hallucinate that there were more movies and then talk about them in our podcast?
What's up with Christian Bale?
Christian Bale You know what's funny? I didn't see the third one, but I saw the fourth one.
Yeah.
And
the third one, I think, was... I've never saw Genesis, but I know the third one, in my opinion, was the weakest entry.
What was the fourth one called?
Salvation.
Salivate.
Terminator. It's where the Terminators learn how to salivate.
Yeah.
And the Resistance...
And cry.
And cry, and the Resistance doesn't know how to handle it.
Christian Bale was no problem in that movie. He did a good job in the role. It was just an unnecessary
But he also wasn't the main character.
Yeah.
No one gave a shit about him.
Well, no one gave a shit about the movie. It didn't need to exist.
Well, yeah, no, the whole movie was bad, but if there were any character that was meant to be focused on, it was the secret Terminator that didn't realize he was a Terminator. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. That was the point of the movie. It just
I know, but he was the only character that people cared about. Like, John Connor was boring, and he wasn't in it very often. He was not the main character of that movie.
Well, that's why the Terminator sequels were unnecessary. Beyond the one we're talking about.
Yeah.
They're kind of a watching your sausage get made situation where they can only make it worse by over-explaining something that had the right amount of explanation in the two movies that were good.
I like watching sausage get made, though, so...
I mean, yeah, you're a sick fuck.
I don't know, what was that noise?
It
was me.
It was your sick fuck noise. No, my closing thoughts are that the movie was superbly edited, paced, acted, written, produced. The special effects were great. Everything about it was what I want from a sci-fi action movie. I would say...
Giving it a score out of 10? Are we doing that? Is that something we should do?
No, it's not.
We've been giving letter grades tonight, though.
Those are more metaphorical, though.
Okay.
It was a metaphorical A and B. Once you give it a number, it's very final.
Should it just be recommended or not recommended?
Well, I think it's very clear by this point that we recommend this movie.
I can't wait to talk about a movie we hate.
That'll come.
It will come. Solo? No, I hated it more than you did.
That movie's already irrelevant, first of all.
It really is.
We're recording this in mid-June. It's a full 3 weeks, which might as well be 3 years after Solo, A Star Wars Hope came out, or whatever the fuck it was called.
A new butt.
A new butt.
Yeah.
Where there's a giant squid that lives in an orange-black hole that is the climax of a movie.
Because?
Well, that's the end of that sentence, just because.
Okay.
What are your closing thoughts? Mine are basically, I love the movie and it's great.
My closing thoughts are, it was awesome. I was awestruck.
Is there anything you wanted to highlight that we just didn't get a chance to get to?
Not really. I mean, we've been talking for a while now. We've covered most of the points. I think we've covered pretty much everything that really matters.
When Arnold chops his arm skin off, it's really cool.
That was cool.
It was cool.
Okay, it was awesome.
It was awesome.
It was another example of why are we trying to think of last minute
things.
Shout out to my boy Stan Winston,
the supervisor of all the special effects.
Yes, sir.
Can we just say that there were 2 back-to-back special effects in the final-ish big fight between Arnold and T-1000. They happened within 10-20 seconds of each other that were both like the biggest show-off moments for the special effects team, and they just completely deserved to show off because it worked so well in the scene. The first is when T-1000 is thrown against the wall face first, and then just flips. Just his face flies through his head, and he's turned around in an instant.
Yeah,
that was great. Followed by Arnold punching through his head, and then his head just morphing to the side of the fist, and the fight continues.
Yeah, the head becomes 2 hands holding his arm.
Oh, and the head becomes the hands. Yeah. I mean, those 2 back-to-back effects are basically worth watching the movie just for that little 30 seconds.
And for the time, for 1991, I mean, it was groundbreaking.
And I guess I would also say along those lines is that it was groundbreaking at the time. It holds up now.
Still looked good to me.
Yeah. The nitpicks we had about some of the visual effects were just that. They were nitpicks. The movie still looks good, whatever this is, 27 years.
It's still one of the more impressive movies visually. I think Jurassic Park will always hold the title for me for the most impressive visually for its time. Because that movie came out 3 years later, and it's still, well, Terminator 2 came out in 1991.
Jurassic Park was 93.
1994.
It was 93.
Was it 93?
Pretty sure. Doesn't matter.
Someone will leave a comment.
I hope so.
And let us know. Though I'm sure
we can't Google it, so I hope someone comments to let us know.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up for this episode of the podcast, talking about Terminator 2.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Which is funny because the whole movie's about avoiding Judgment Day, but it's called Judgment Day.
Because it sounds awesome.
It does.
Everything about that movie is just awesome.
It shows off without ever feeling like it's showing off.
Even when we put it under a microscope, I thought that I was going to find a lot more that I didn't like about it.
No, it was hard to find things not to like.
But it still remains. I have the same feelings that I had back when I was a kid. It's the only way I can sum it up.
Yeah, it's just a
awesome.
It's just an amazing movie to watch.
Say it.
It's awesome.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. I hope that you enjoyed yourselves.
I know we enjoyed ourselves, didn't we, Johnny?
I was smiling a bit. I'm pretty emotionless. I'm a broken human being, so I don't smile that often. But Terminator 2 put a smile on my face.
Seeing you actually exhibit emotions puts a smile on my face.
Yeah, you would think that I was a Terminator the way I act. Maybe that's why I smiled, is because I know now why you smile. It's something I cannot do.
All right, everybody. All right. This is Ryan.
This is Johnny.
Signing off.
Take care. Do